talk about the 1.5 series. Such an effective series of crankbaits that Lucky Craft has. It has really changed my crankbait fishing over the last handful of years. The reason I say that is, one, they're so effective. I catch so many fish all season long. My 1.5 box that I have in my boat never leaves the boat. I can have deep crankbaits, jerk baits, top waters. You know, I'm not gonna put my top water box in the boat if it's, you know, January, February. It's just not something that's gonna go in the boat. But the 1.5 box that I have is in there all year long. It stays in. That's one of those boxes that stays in the boat regardless of where I am in the country and regardless of what time of year. They for sure shine during different times of the year, but I've caught them throughout the entire seasonal pattern of what the fish are doing across the country. Every watercolor you can imagine, from gin clear to can't see 2 inches in the water. 1.5 is such an effective bait. What we've done, Lucky Craft, is the original 1.5 is the square bill. Now there's a 1.5 DD, a little bit deeper one. There's the 2.5s, 3.5s, different series. But the biggest difference with the 1.5s that I've seen as being very an effective tool for fishing across the country is the difference between silent, which has 0 rattle in it, versus the DRS. The DRS stands for deep rattle sound. Now, I've never really been a big fan of that real BB rattle, lots of rattles in it. That DRS is actually a fairly subtle sound. It's not too aggressive. I like that click. Really, that bait wobbles around that pivot point. It makes it to where it just has a little bit of a click. So just as a general rule, I like to throw the 1.5 silent when it's calm, heavily pressured, or the 2 scenarios I like to throw the silent. The DRS is going to be a color that I like when a little bit of adverse conditions. Wind, rain, overcast. Those are really the times I like the DRS because you need a little bit more commotion to trigger those fish. The other scenario to go with the DRS is post spawn. A lot of times if it's bright and sunny, I will still use the DRS during the post spawn because a lot of times they like that vibration, they like that sound. Maybe they have to track it, you're fishing around grass. Something with the DRS is better for that. Also stained water. Stained water is a great scenario for throwing the DRS. A few years ago, Takahiro won a bass event. He caught him on the 1.5 DRS at Lake Martin in Alabama. It was early in the spring and Tak was running way up the river. I was all the way down at the dam in the Clearwater catching spotted bass in 30, 40 feet of water. Takahiro wins the tournament running way up the river fishing stained water and calling on a 1.5 DRS. He ran to that stained water and ended up catching those fish on that DRS. The difference between those two baits, that silent versus the DRS, when to throw them. Again, this bait is something that I've caught them in so many different scenarios. That box stays in my boat because it's such an effective tool for catching more fish, and therefore that 1.5 is just by far my favorite crankbait. You know, we've talked about the 1.5, you know, the square bill, the shallow runner. So let's jump into the 1.5 DD DRS. This can have a bigger bill on it that goes a little bit deeper, as well as the XD for extra deep, and just kind of talk about how, when, you know, the different scenarios on when we're going to throw these. So for the last several years, the 1.5 DD DRS has been a very big bait for me. It's a great mid-depth crankbait. I say mid-depth, it's great for fishing that 8 to 10 foot zone. Anything deeper than about 6 or 7, I will throw the 1.5 DD, especially the DRS. I like the DRS better, the deep rattle sound better on a bait that dives deeper. I feel like they bite that bait a little bit better. The other thing I like about this is I can wind it very, very fast. It doesn't roll, it doesn't spin. I can really move this thing along. I like throwing these baits the best in the springtime when the water is cold, especially the XD. The XD is gonna run deeper than the 1.5 DD. This bait right here is gonna be that more of that 12 foot zone, you know, maybe that 10 to 14 foot zone. Unique thing about that is it's really a small bait. It's a small profile bait, but it gets very deep. If I'm fishing that 6 to 10 foot zone, I'm gonna go with the 1.5 DD, DRS. And then if I get into that, you know, 10 plus foot zone, I'm gonna throw that XD. The thing I really like about that XD is it gets down deep very quickly. So if you think about getting down deep with a light line and making a really, really long cast, this bait will actually get very deep. As it gets closer to the boat, it starts getting a little bit deeper. So you can fish this thing out quite a bit deeper than other baits. Where these things really excel is that little bit cooler water. Springtime, especially if they're keying on crawfish, I really like that 1.5 DD DRS because you can throw that thing and let that thing just grovel around. Get that thing to just really root around on the rocks. That's when they really bite it. But that's also when these baits shine, because if they're bouncing along the bottom, every time they hit a little bit bigger rock, they like to deflect. So a fish will track this and they'll be following it. And when that thing is going along and it's making the same movement and it hits a rock and it goes like this, that's when they attack it. It's very similar to a lipless crankbait in the grass. They're tracking, they don't bite it, it hangs up in the grass, it snaps free, that's when they pounce on it. It's the same thing with a deep crankbait. You want that thing hitting bottom. When it's hitting the bottom, it's changing direction. The fish love that change in direction. Now I have a small bodied bait that I can cover in those little bit deeper zones. So the square bill 1.5, I'll fish that thing from 2 to 6. When I get from 6 to 10, 1.5 DD. That 10 to 14, that 1.5 XD. Making this in several different models, silence, rattles, different things, but this right here is a very sexy, smaller, good bait for high pressure situations, that little bit deeper water. Let's jump into the DRS series a little bit more. That DRS, deep rattle sound, is what it stands for. So DRS, deep rattle sound. That deep rattle sound is not too loud. It just has that kind of a knock to it almost, that kind of rattle. It's not a real BB rattle sound. It's a very consistent rattle. I really like that sound for attracting those fish. It has a little bit more vibration, a little bit more sound. The fish can track it from farther away. It's great in the early spring cold water, but guess what? It's also very, very effective later in post-spawn. Those fish get off. They seem to like rattles more. I don't know why it is, but when they're post-spawn situations, summertime, they like a rattle in it. Again, I don't know why I'm not a bass, but I just know what they like. And they like that deep rattle sound post-spawn. Anytime you can get that post-spawn situation, that rattle's gonna catch more fish. The other thing I really like these for is the adverse conditions. Wind, rain, overcast. They really seem to bite something with a rattle in it better because they can track it from farther away. Stained water is another great example. They can track it from farther away. In clear water, if it's silent, they'll see it from 20 feet away. But in stained water, they're not gonna see it 20 feet away, but they're gonna feel the vibration, they're gonna hear the vibration, and they can track it from a lot farther away, whereas they couldn't do that with that silent one. Having the ability to go from a silent to a deep rattle sound is such an effective tool as an angler on the water to capitalize on the different scenarios that you're faced with. The deep rattle sound in the 1.5 series has done that. Now I've had this bait for quite a while now and I've thrown it a bunch and I actually really like this bait. This here is the 1.5 Wave DRS. The one thing you can't really see on this is that lip angle. It has a kind of an L-shaped lip. So it looks completely different than anything we've ever seen on the market for a standard crankbait. That lip that's on there has this weird L-shaped bill and it's a short little steep angled bill. So what that's gonna do, it's gonna dive shallower. So if you're gonna be fishing in real shallow water, you're fishing in grass, this is gonna be a great option. The action on this thing when you're reeling it in, it doesn't just wobble and come to you. The whole time you're reeling this thing, it's going like this. It's moving around, it's real erratic. That is what catches fish. It's gonna catch a lot of fish. 1.5 Wave DRS. If you wanna talk about matching the hatch, Lucky Craft has done that with the sizing in the 1.5 series. Honestly, they've got them from 0.5 to 1.0s. Look at that thing, 5.5. Think about a 5.5 versus a 0.5, or the 1.5 versus a 5.5. You can match the hatch. There's so many different scenarios for just sticking with the 1.5. You want something a little bit bigger, you go with the 2.5, or something that's a little bit more buoyant. If you're fishing around more wood, go with that 2.5. If the fish are bigger, they like bigger baits, different times in the spring that seems like they like a bigger bait, go with that 3.5, or get bold and go with a 4.5 and a 5.5. The fish bite this. The very first fish I ever caught on a 5.5 was a 2-pounder. Look at that bait. It's almost the size of a baseball, it seems like. It's a big bait. They will bite a bigger bait if that's the scenario they want. Lucky Craft has designed the different sizes to match what you want. 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, all the way up to the 5.5. Lucky Craft has what you want. Now that we've talked about the entire series of the 1.5. And we talked about 1.5s, we talked about 5.5s, sizing of them. We've talked about the deeper diver ones, the deep rattle sound, the extra deep. We have all the sizes to match the need. So let's talk about the colors now. Like everything else in the Lucky Craft line, we have colors for certain scenarios. In front of me are a lot of the different scenarios that we have. There's kind of 3 versions. There's the shad versions, there's the crawdads, there's a perch kind of bluegill pattern. Even a chartreuse black, I consider that a shad pattern in stained water. The 3 versions are shad, crawdad, and bluegill perch. Those are the 3 categories. So for me, the all-time one to throw is the pearl threadfin shad. That's such a natural looking shad pattern. Has a white side to it, there's a little chartreuse line down it, has a little bit of a blue on the shoulder with a black on the back. To me, that's the all-time shad color. But guess what? If you like something a little more flash, we have the golden shiner. So if it's kind of adverse conditions, dark water, dark conditions, rain, overcast, go with that golden shiner. The golden shiner is a great color in that shad imitation. If it's clear, sunny, go with the ghost minnow. They like a light color. It's just, think about visibility. If it's bright, sunny, and calm, to me, they get too good of a view at the shiner color, the golden shiner, or even a pearl threadfin. To me, it's almost too good of a view. Go with something that's a little bit more subtle, and I think the fish tend to bite it a little bit more. Now, if the water's really stained, go with that chartreuse black. That's such a common color across the country for stained water is going chartreuse black. I don't know why. If I was a fish, I would never bite the chartreuse black. Doesn't look like anything in the water, but they bite it and they love it. So many tournaments are won on a chartreuse with a black back in stained water. Now, anytime you're fishing in the winter time and early spring, red, T.O. craw. You can't go wrong with red anytime in the spring, anywhere in the country. They bite it. I've caught a lot of fish in really clear water on a red one in the spring. There's something about that T.O. craw color in those spring months that those fish really, really like, winter and early spring. Around the spawn, that's when I go to the bluegill color, that B.E. gill. Fish hate bluegill. They hate them with a passion around the spawn. So if you're fishing a 1.5 series in the springtime, go with that B.E. gill. Or if you're fishing up north, someplace that has a lot of perch, the B.E. gill also mimics a perch. We have all the colors to tackle any scenario that you're faced with. Not only do we have the colors, we have the sizes, the 1.5s, 2.5s, 3.5s, 4, 5.5s. We have the sizes to tackle any scenario you want. We also have the depth changes. We have the 1.5s to fish in that 2 to 5. We have the 1.5 DD to fish in that 6 to 10 foot zone. We have the XD to fish from that 10 to 14 foot zone. The 1.5 family covers every scenario. They cover the depth. They cover all the color options. It is the perfect crankbait line of any family out there, and Lucky Craft has done that.